Welcome to the CFB Dynasty Podcast with hosts Matt Knowles, Brian McElfresh, and Doug Gravely.
Hey everybody, how you doing out there in CFBDynasty.com, fantasy football land? It's the Halloween edition of the podcast. As always, my name is Matt Knowles, alongside the one, the only master, overseer, overlord of everything CFB Dynasty, Brian McElfresh. Brian, how you doing on this Halloween edition of the show?
Man, doing good. Trick-or-treating and stuff. Normally this time of year I'm out in Vegas for the SEMA show, but that doesn't happen until next week, and I'm skipping out on that this year. So happy to be home and all that stuff, but Master, I don't know. We'll see. I'm really trying to get into the top 6 of the Masters there. I'm a win or two away from that one, but Florida, Georgia this weekend.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be a beat down by Georgia.
What do you think about, I guess, the next couple of years? Obviously, Jacksonville is going to be going through a bazillion-dollar stadium renovation. So you're going to have the largest cocktail party is going to be in Atlanta one year, going to be in Tampa one year. What do you think about the fact that it's going to become a little bit less of a neutral site for a couple of years while that stadium renovation's happening?
I just think, like, why? Why do it in an NFL stadium? Why not go home and home? Like, that just made so much sense. And it's like, it's your once every 2-decade chance to go see your team play at Georgia or at Florida. And I think that's what a lot of the fans wanted, me included. Like, I would have definitely tried to go to that game depending on, how the team was performing at the time, if there was a chance or not.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, but I mean, it's at least that when Jacksonville has that stadium renovation done, it's going to be the even bigger, largest outdoor cocktail party.
Yep.
So we have a great show today. Today we're going to talk a lot about playoffs. We're going to talk about the actual college football playoff, where we stand. We're going to talk a little bit about our home, our Open, and our Masters League. We do have some special information to give to anybody that's playing in the Open and the Masters League. As my late brother Mark would say, more games equals more fun, and we're going to talk about how we can get some more games in there. And then we talk about all the other fun stuff, the rankings and our brisket locks and all that fun stuff. So BMAC, why don't we go straight to where we stand in the actual college football 12-team playoff? Let's see where we stand this week.
All right. So let me try and pull this one up. Right now we've got Oregon, Georgia, BYU, and Miami.
Yeah.
I don't know.
BYU at the number 4 spot. Yeah, it's interesting because that's going to be the top group of 5. That's kind of like the whole thing with Alabama still being out of the playoffs. That's probably going to sort itself out. For Alabama to not make the playoff, they're going to have to lose another game. Yeah. I think that if Alabama wins out, they're still going to be there. Boise State at 12. That's a team that's looking like they're going to be the top group of 5 team, unless, obviously you got any given Saturday, or in college football, any given Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. You never know what's going to happen there, but they are just looking like a team that's really put together right now. Then you've got Penn State at 5, and then Boise State at 12. You've got Ohio State at 6, Clemson at 11. You've got Texas at 7, Texas A&M at 10. That would be a wild playoff matchup there. Tennessee at 8, Notre Dame at 9 would be your playoff field right now. Other than BYU, any surprises to you in there, or is that pretty much how you would see it falling out?
So from a fantasy point of view and just a team point of view, like who do you feel comfortable starting along the way for Tennessee or Ohio State, who we both projected to have, where we expected them to have great offenses, and they just haven't really fully clicked. Now, Ohio State's been fine, but you can't start either running back. Will Howard's been okay. Jeremiah Smith, maybe you would feel most comfortable starting him. Obviously, this week against Penn State, it's going to be interesting to see do they fall out of the playoff conversation? And then what happens there? Because I know the fans aren't stoked after that lackluster squeak of a home win against Nebraska, who had just got crushed by Indiana the week before. So,
I think Jeremiah Smith for Ohio State, I think Dylan Sampson for Tennessee are probably the only two guys right now that I would even consider in my fantasy playoffs. I think Iamaliava has fallen off since the beginning of the season. Beginning of the season, he looked like somebody that could do no wrong. And right now, he's definitely struggling. But I think those are the two guys that if I had them, I would definitely be, which I do have Sampson, but I definitely would consider having in that lineup.
Yeah, it's tough. It's just kind of really not what we expected. And you get that, you see that a little bit more with some of the games that already happened this week with, like Liberty. We've seen Byron Brown and USF, quarterbacks that just aren't really they're just not what they were at all a year ago.
Byron Brown definitely. Yeah, Byron Brown definitely is it's some funny that you bring him up because I actually had looked at him this morning and wanted to bring him up as well, where you have somebody who he's been injured, so he hasn't played for a while. But if you go back and look at his numbers before he got injured, it was completely lackluster. He was somebody that was in the top two, probably, with Caden Salter at the top, who we expected were going to do big things. And even before his injury, if you have Byron Brown, you probably are having a pretty rough season because that's somebody you probably, spent a super high draft pick on thinking he was going to do something good, just like Salter. Liberty, how are they going to lose 2 games in a row to Kennesaw State and Jacksonville State? Come on, Liberty, you were undefeated. You were looking to make some noise to potentially get a playoff spot, and now you have dropped 2 dud games like that. That's shocking.
Yeah, looking at the quarterback rankings so far this year, as you kind of like reset your brain and you get ready for those last few weeks before a playoff run, like Gabriel, he came in like right there, at least on our rankings, with Salter and Byron Brown, who were pretty much consensus 1-2 from what I saw going into the season. And they're supposedly a little bit foolproof where they're dual threat guys. It's like, okay, if CJ Daniels is gone and leaves to LSU, we kind of expect him to either find someone else and have Sibley or someone else step in, but at least he's going to get his rushing touchdowns. That hasn't been the case for either one of those guys. Gabriel currently is QB 9 on the season and total fantasy points. He's not been great, but at least he's been better after kind of a lackluster start. The first couple games were weird against inferior opponents. He was like QB 65, QB 42. And then he's been right there at a top 12, top 20 kind of guy for most of the rest of the year. Some other guys that we kind of expected to be good going into the season that have lived up to their hype: Jordan McLeod, Jackson Dart. And really, when we were going through the data, one of the things that it shocked me to see who was at number 5. Even like after that Georgia game when Alabama, played that great first half, they've just been blah. They're like nothing has clicked. They haven't had a great offensive performance since then. But to see Milroe as QB5 in fantasy, that's surprising to me.
It is very surprising to me as well. I mean, especially considering that he is on the surface sounded like and felt like a quarterback that's kind of struggled, especially in recent weeks. And maybe that's why, we're only seeing where Milroe's been for the last couple of weeks. But yeah, Milroe being at 5 is definitely very shocking. I think it was actually interesting last night too. I was watching Western Kentucky, and they haven't felt like the Western Kentucky of years past in their stats, but they're still averaging like 508 yards per game of offense. And I'm like, this doesn't even feel like that at all.
Yep. I felt duped a little bit by Western Kentucky. That's just one of those offenses where normally you get that right receiver and it's week in, week out, but that's just not been the case, man. They're spreading it around. Players seem to get hot for a couple games and then they fall off for a couple games. it's a nightmare trying to get the right
Yeah,
fantasy lineup from that team.
for that team, I definitely was very, very high on Dalvin Smith, as many of us were.
Yeah.
The highest ranking returning player coming from last year, and we're like, surely he's going to be the guy that's going to take over from Malachi Corley, and that has not been the case in any way. And like you said, they spread it around so much that it's almost like if you play a Western Kentucky wide receiver, it's basically like you're just just getting a scratch off lottery ticket. You really don't
That's
have
true. That's true.
You really don't have much of a chance of picking the right guy. I feel like Veltkamp right now is the only guy that is fantasy worthy in that offense on a week in, week out basis. You'll see in our rankings that the rankings actually do agree with that as well this week. So yeah, we can go over there and take a look. So you got Veldkamp, which is interesting. If you look at Veldkamp, the rankings, it's interesting when we do the podcast and there are guys that have already played for the week, so we can actually look at a case study. And Veldkamp, I think, had 26 total points last night. If you watched the game, he had a really, really good first quarter. And you're like, oh man, this is going to be a Western Kentucky style game. And I think he had twice as many points in the first quarter as he had in the rest in his quarters 2, 3, 4.
It's weird.
So he ended with like 26 points. The rankings projected him
32.
Projected him 32. So we were close. They actually had a lot of rushing yards. They had a lot of rushing yards for a Western Kentucky team last night. So that's kind of what took some stats away from him. You don't expect Western Kentucky to have a lot of long rushing touchdowns, and that's exactly what happened last night. But oddly enough, Kennesaw State came to play. The score doesn't show it, but Kennesaw State, as poor as they've been, actually, showed that maybe they're going to be a force. Maybe they might have a chance to get another upset at the end of the season. Who the heck knows? I do think the one thing that you need to keep in mind, looking at the rankings this week, there are a ton of teams that are very significant on a bye. Washington State, Boise State, Alabama are all on a bye. So there's a lot of names that you're used to seeing at the top of the list that are nowhere to be found. It's not because the system has downgraded them. It's just because they're on a bye this week. But I also think if you look, especially at the quarterbacks, most of the quarterbacks at the top of the list in the top 10 are group of 5, because we're now into the situation where group of 5 talented players are going to have a chance to rise to the top because they're playing against group of 5 defenses. You don't really see a whole lot of power 4 quarterbacks show up until Cam Ward at 9 and Rocco Becht at 11, Cade Klubnik at 12, Josh Hoover at 13. So yeah, it makes for an interesting, who do I start?
Absolutely. Bryson Daly, man, him and the Navy quarterback. So Army and Navy there, they have been pretty consistent all year. And that's crazy to see as you kind of look back and do a reset of where things were projection wise going into the season and where they have turned out, where, we got a lot of them up here that were good. We were high on Mateer. No, sorry, not Mateer. Chandler Morris, a little bit. He's right now QB2. Cam Ward obviously was up there, Milrow, McLeod, Gabriel, Dart, Riley Leonard, etc. Nussmeyer is kind of pretty much right where we projected him. Shador, same thing, pretty much right where we projected him. Klubnik's been up a little bit, but it does. Kind of looking back and then looking over at the consistency tool there. Currently, they are ranked by how many fantasy points they have year to date in the most ugly page we have on the website that will certainly get a facelift in the off season. But nuts to see that stuff, man. Some of the projection differences are spot on. Some of them are wild. And then you see Bryson Daly up there as no one else averaging as many fantasy points per game as him at quarterback,
which is absolutely shocking. Yeah, if you go to overall players, who has got the highest average points per game? Obviously, Ashton Genty is the unicorn because of when a guy can have 130 yards rushing and a touchdown and and a receiving touchdown, and that's a bad game. That's pretty insane. But yeah, Genty's at 1. Bryson Daly is number 2 overall, considering all positions. Mateer Morris, Harvath for Navy. Caleb Johnson, again, somebody that I completely, missed on, had him and dropped him, and Caleb Johnson is in the top 10, which is amazing. Dylan Sampson, Nick Nash are right there near the top 10s, but obviously most of the positions are quarterbacks, but it's interesting to see Nick Nash up there as high as he is as well. So many guys that are not quarterbacks that are having great seasons, which is interesting to see.
Yep. But yeah, as far as this week, does anything stand out to you? So quarterback wise, I think we've mentioned it, but we got Veltkamp 1, Shapen number 2, which he's not been up there at all.
I think that's the first time we've even mentioned his name on the show. So that's very interesting to see him. I think that's a product of who he's playing against.
Exactly.
UMass.
They're home against UMass. Right. And so 38.5 points for Mississippi State. They love to throw it around. So he's projected to get 30. Not going to shock me if he ends up being our QB1 this week after Veltkamp kind of missed the projection by like 4 or 5, 6 points there. Dampier there at 3, Daly at 4, Colton Joseph at 5. Some interesting ones up there. And then we go McLeod, Gleason, Aguilar, Cam Ward for Miami against Duke. They're projected to score 37. And we've got Cam Ward at 25 fantasy points projected even. And then Horvath from Navy rounds out the top 10. Does anything stand out to you? One, I'll say for me, one of the things that kind of stands out is Gabriel still being 16th, even though Oregon is traveling on the road at Michigan.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, that's projected. They're still projected to score 30 against Michigan on the road. So that's just something you're not used to seeing after, like when you see that in Fantrax and you're setting your lineup and you see that at Michigan logo there, that's one where it's like, normally you're sitting them on the bench, but I can't really, it's weird to see them still projected to score 30.
Well, I think another thing, it's always interesting, like I said, looking at a guy that's already played and seeing what the projections have him set for. Caden Salter, he's ranked at 15. He had a dud of a game last night. We had him projected at just under 23. If he was just under 17. The fact of the matter is, though, he's still pretty much close to where the system projected him. So it just shows that the new algorithm is working, and you can't project a guy, in a team having another dud of a game like that. But it's still showing that the projections are pretty close.
Yep, Rocco Becht remains a great start going up against Texas Tech. They're terrible against the pass. Louisville kind of surprised, like they're supposed to be a defensive team. They've not been good against the pass. So Klubnik could have a great game. He's there projected as QB 12 this week. And yeah, you mentioned Josh Hoover for TCU on the road at Baylor. And that's going to be kind of a shootout. It's a 31-34 kind of game, TCU and Baylor. So a lot of fantasy starters will come from there.
Let's roll on down to the rankings. Hey, we're already in the rankings right now. We will be talking about the big news about our Open and our Masters League and the playoffs here when we're done with this. But we definitely, since we're already in the rankings, let's go ahead and do it now. The running backs are showing exactly what you would expect, where a lot of the big names are playing this week. The cream has risen to the top of the crop. I don't think that there's a name other than Trevor Etienne that has made his way into the top 10 that's somebody that hasn't been there regularly this year.
Yep. And Florida's 90th against the run. Or against fantasy running backs at least. So it's not surprising. I would expect the game script there to go in favor of Trevor Etienne. And obviously I'm rooting for him to get crushed. But stats will kind of lead that way. And Georgia is trying to figure out their running game just the same as oddly, Ohio State and their O-line. They're just not been able to consistently run the ball. Georgia's kind of right there, and they're trying to figure things out there as they get ready for the stretch run heading into the playoff. You just kind of expect ETN to get a heavy workload, and they have been running him as the true RB1, which is nice to see from a fantasy perspective. But going up against that Florida defense, which while improved against Kentucky, who's fine, and you look at how Georgia struggled a little bit against Kentucky, but Georgia's different after that game against Texas on the road, losing I think 3 turnovers, and they still won by 2 scores. Georgia should pound Florida. I'm kind of shocked at it's only 16.5 point spread there, but plenty of points to go around for Georgia. ETN is the best start of the week from the Georgia Bulldogs.
So I love looking at this list and seeing my home league team. I've got running backs at 1, 7, 11, and 14 on this list. So I'm going to pose a question to you. On this list, you've got Jonah Coleman from Washington playing at home against USC. You've got Omari and Hampton for UNC playing away against Florida State. Would you stick with those rankings with Coleman at 11 and Omari and Hampton at 14, or would you buck the rankings and play Hampton if you could pick one or the other?
All right, so on the season, Jonah Coleman's averaging 16 fantasy points per game. Hampton, 22. Florida State has been pitiful. And if I remember correctly, Hampton has had a pretty incredible game against Florida State in the past. I would probably buck the rankings at that point in time there, because Hampton, I'd favor him a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's who I've got in there. I think I've got Hampton
in the rankings, but
I think I've got Hampton in, and I've got Coleman out. But that's one of those. It's a good problem to have. Good problem to have where you're benching a top 14 running back. But yeah, I think that Hampton is finally starting to show up here at the end of the season. Yeah, he hasn't had a game below 17 points in the last 5 weeks. He's been over 100 yards every week. He's had 6 touchdowns. His last week was the best week he's had in a month versus UVA, just under 28 points. So Hampton is probably going to stay in the lineup.
Yep.
Not really anything else on the wide receivers that jump out at me. Or excuse me, on the running backs that jump out at me. Ollie Gordon being at 30. He's probably one of the biggest enigmas of the year, where either he is crushing it or he is non-existent. And it's tough to count on Ollie Gordon right now, especially heading into the playoffs, because you don't want to have another one of those disappearing act games in a game that's going to be so important, either heading into a playoff push or actually trying to stay in the playoffs.
Yep.
All right, let's jump down to wide receivers. We got some of the same names that were at the top last week. Devontae Ross, number 1 again. Omari Kelly. Those are guys, Tet McMillan, that are always at the top. Denzel Boston, always at the top. Anybody stick out to you right now at the top of the list? We have a Western Kentucky wide receiver, Keyshawn Johnson, that is at 11. Maybe he's there because of name. Maybe the system thought he was the other Keyshawn Johnson. You never know. But what do you think about the way that the wide receivers are ranked?
Well, I don't like how Keyshawn Johnson finished out, because he didn't get a touchdown yet again. And that's really the difference in the projection. If he would have had one more catch for a touchdown, he hits the projection. But no, he ends with like 8.5 fantasy points last night. So that is just yet another disappointing effort at receiver for me. That's just been a struggle across all leagues, from leagues where I went wide receiver heavy, even with Torrey Horton and a couple other guys who just have been battling injuries and underperforming, and it's just been a battle. So you got other guys like Tez Johnson up there at 15. Love obviously what he's doing. Avery Morrow is there to fill in for Torrey Horton as their top wide receiver. They got a road game against Nevada. We've got him projected there 20th. Magdalena there again. They're playing Hawaii, so that should be 30 plus points there for Fresno State. Trey Harris against Arkansas. That one's kind of projected. That's a sneaky game there for Ole Miss. On the road at Arkansas, it's projected to be like a 30-23 kind of game. If they both score a little bit more, it's going to be a super high scoring game. So, Trey Harris, I expect him obviously to be in there the whole game, and that one's going to be interesting. Amari Thomas is the one that's kind of surprising that he's up there at number 7. He's only got 89 points on the fantasy season, less than 13 fantasy points per game. But they're going up against Tulsa, 130th against fantasy wide receivers, and that's projected to be like a 31-28 kind of game. He's someone that had buzz going into the season, so it's not surprising that he's doing well. It's just surprising to see him projected that high, but he's picking up steam a little bit there.
Couple of guys to note, Joey Hobart, Joe Dirt at 21. He had an absolute dud of a game the other night. I think it was like 2 catches for 10 yards, but he did throw a 2-point conversion, not receive. He actually was the quarterback on the 2-point conversion. So that's the only thing that I'm not even going to say saved him, because the stat line was absolutely dreadful. And then at 26, Luke Wysong, he's somebody I picked up in the Masters League last week, and he absolutely screwed me. Because, well, here's the thing. So Luke Wysong in the last 4 weeks had 15 targets, 9, 7, 15. Last week, he gets 1 target, gets injured on it, is in a walking boot after the 1 target. So he comes out of the game with a big fat 0.0 stat line after dropping 20.9 points the week before on 10 receptions for 156 yards. So it is what it is. Stuff happens like that. You can't project injuries, but that was absolutely brutal. A guy that's been such a huge part of that offense, 46 targets in the past 4 weeks to get 1 target and then out with an injury. So to see if he actually is going to play is going to be huge. That's something we actually do have in our news and notes for this week as well. Let's go down and take a quick look at the tight ends. I don't really think that there's a lot of difference in the tight ends, a lot of the same names. I do think that the biggest thing for us this year is that outside of 1 tight end for Bowling Green, everybody else is just kind of there. There's some weeks they're doing good. I feel like we are getting a little more production out of the tight end position than we have in years past. I don't think we have that, 3-4 guys that are head and shoulders above everybody else. We have the 1 guy from Bowling Green. But you never know what's going to happen in a week. Holden Willis has had his times, Justin Jolie, Aronde Gadsden, Colston Loveland. Not only is he catching, balls, he's starting fights. So it's interesting. So there's definitely a few tight ends out there. We have 5 tight ends projected in double digits this week. We'll see if that actually stays that way when we're at the end of the week. Anything stick out to you there, B-Mac?
Not really. I know Holden Willis was hurt in the last game, so that's something to watch. But nothing really stands out. You got Bauer Sharp up there if you're looking for like that late waiver wire sleeper or someone like super deep in DraftKings and cheap, averaging 6.5 fantasy points per game. With them projected to score 40 this week, that bumps his projection to almost double what his season average has been in fantasy points per game. So that could be like a super deep sleeper in a DraftKings or something like that.
All right, so there you go with the rankings. If you want to be able to do your own sifting and sorting and searching on the rankings, that's where you need to be subscribed to cfbdynasty.com. We help you take your college fantasy football experience to the next level, especially when you've got the playoffs coming up. You're probably in a position to where you're either in the playoff hunt or you're going to be needing to make a playoff run, and you need to make sure you got the right information to be able to hopefully win your league, unless you're in a league with me or BMAC, and then you can hopefully come in third.
Not for me this year. Not for me. It's been the struggle bus on the injuries and nope.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we go to one quick piece of news and notes first, and then we'll go through the full news and notes. Then we'll go to the discussion about the playoffs. So,
yeah, hit it.
All right, here we go. So news and notes.
Oh, my bad. I thought you wanted that later. So let's go.
Give me the drop. Give me the drop.
News and notes around college football.
All right, don't be scared by the news and notes this week on Halloween. We got quarterback Curtis Rourke from Indiana. Now he's on track to play Week 10. Last week, he was said to be potentially out for the foreseeable future. Now they're saying he might be back soon. Tight end Caden Prescorn for Ole Miss, probable for this week versus Arkansas. Wide receiver Squirrel White for Tennessee is not on the SEC injury report, so he should be good to go. Is that going to matter based on the way he's been performing this year? Who the heck knows? Running back Demi Sumo Carnvey for UK, probable for Week 10. The Quinton Jackson, running back Arkansas, out again this week. He is out of here. Montrell Johnson, UF, questionable for Week 10. Wide receiver Montrell Johnson for you. Did I say, hold on. Wide receiver Eugene Wilson for UF. He is out of here for this week. Wide receiver Luke Wysong, we just talked about him for New Mexico. He's in practice in a non-contact jersey. Monitor this as he's been one of the most productive wide receivers in recent weeks before that injury. Quarterback Sam Levitt for Arizona State will start in Week 10. Quarterback Baron Morton, Texas Tech, is going to start against Iowa in Week 10. And last but not least, running back Raleek Brown for Arizona State. He is redshirting for the rest of 2024. That's the quick news and notes for this week. BMAC, anything that you want to call out in that list?
Raleek Brown is redshirting? Brutal.
Yes.
Brutal. This guy had a ton of hype, 5-star running back coming out, and just can't seem to find a spot. Just seems like a bust.
And then we do have one other piece of news and notes that I pulled out just for BMAC. Crazy stat of the season so far. Florida State is the only FBS school out of 133 teams that has not scored over 21 points in a game this season. BMAC, I know you're a Florida fan. I know that the end of last season did not go well for Florida State, but in any way did you expect to see Florida State already eliminated from bowl contention at 1-7 after going undefeated last year?
No, I didn't see that, but it's clearly in a season where fantasy is like on the struggle bus. I'm like middle of the pack in every league that I'm in. Like fighting for a playoff spot. The Gators are but improving. Like that's the only thing. That's the only thing I can hold on to that's been great this season is how bad Florida State's been. Now, the way that this could bite me is if Florida turns it around enough, they keep Napier another year, and Florida State gets Lane Kiffin, then I'm crushed. So I know I've got some FSU friends that are hoping for that, but it's been unfathomable. But as we go into the season, to this offseason, that's something to look at where you've got DJU coming in. Man, it's he is what we thought he was, to go back to the Dennis Green comment.
Yes.
They didn't have elite wide receivers after they lost Keon Coleman, all that stuff. Man, it's just not gelled.
I think it just goes to show that the portal can bite you in the butt because, they spent a ton of money in NIL money to bring in a quarterback like that, and it just did not work. I think it's clear that DJU is a bust, and it is what it is. I'm saying? Some teams go out there and get a Cam Ward. Some teams go out there and get somebody at that level. Some teams get somebody at DJU. I mean, imagine if that would have been the opposite. Imagine if Cam Ward goes to Florida State and DJU goes to Miami. We're probably having full different conversations. Now, I don't think Florida State is going to have the record Miami does, but I think if you just switch those positions, maybe they're both 500 teams now. You never know.
FSU is not playing up to their talent level in general, but if you take this is something we're all about to experience. There's going to be fantasy playoffs that are wrecked by teams that just kind of, when they get out of playoff contention, let's say Ole Miss, they drop the game to Georgia next week. I think they play them next week, and then that's their third loss, and we just expect them to be out of the race. does the team play with fire, or do they kind of give up going into the fantasy playoffs where maybe you relied on Jackson Dart off and on for most of the year, and then he just becomes unstartable in the playoff? I'm not saying it's going to happen to Ole Miss, but that's just an example where a team could give up, and that really, really dramatically affects your playoff run in fantasy football.
Well, so I think that this kind of goes back to the conversation that you and I have had for the last few years. This is why I love the fact that there's the college football playoff coming up. It's kind of like the Dr. Pepper commercial where you've got everybody on the hype train and everybody's like, our team's going all the way this year. And then one thing happens, they fall off the hype train. But what I think with having a 12-team playoff this year does is it keeps far more teams on the hype train longer into the season because, is 2 weeks ago, did Liberty have a chance to win the national championship when they were undefeated? Probably not. But at that point, when they were undefeated, everybody was still on the Liberty hype train because there was still that outside chance. Right now, you probably still have 20, 25 teams in the country that still are truly on the hype train that they might be able to get one of those 12 spots. And I think that's great because I think you have more teams that are still actually playing for that outside chance of having a shot. Now, Boise State might be one of the only teams that we'll see in, a year or two, a couple years that actually truly has a shot. I think Boise State can play with anybody right now just because of having the unicorn of Ashton Jeanty in there. But I love the fact that there's so many teams that are all still playing for the same potential prize. It's like, think about in college basketball, how many teams are losing their minds and people are storming the court over getting a number 16 seed and having to play a number 1. But that joy of them just getting that number 16 seed and winning to get into the dance is huge. I love the fact that we get that, a little bit of that in college football now.
I mean, it is exciting, no doubt. What you said, yes. However, people still used to look forward to bowl games. The younger audience probably won't understand that, but you play for your school and you go and you represent and you go out with a win or whatever. So I think there's a balance of good and bad. You've got the NIL and the money and all that stuff and the portal and the bigger playoff, and those games matter. But I still think to most teams, like if you're a random Georgia Tech or a Liberty, they never stood a chance to make it to the championship. Even if they got the 12th seed, like there's no chance for them. But they could get in there, and then we could all go golf clap for them or whatever. But there's no real excitement there. So I don't know.
Well,
we'll see. We'll see how it evolves.
I think being an SEC fan as well, an SEC fan, you guys are at the top of the heap, and you're looking down at all the other has-beens. You're like, man, you has-beens, whatever. But I mean, for a school like whoever the teams are that make it into the playoff, that are the Group of 5 champion, or maybe an at-large that could be in the Group of 5 or an independent, the recruiting for a school like that is going to be so enhanced. It's going to help their conference. I think it's going to help give a little bit of parity, and I say a little bit, in this age of the Power 4, the Power 2, whatever it might be, just to give other people a little bit of hope. So I love the fact that you get to see a team like Boise State with Ashton Jeanty being like, we actually have a chance to go do something and play after December 17th because the Mountain West Conference champion normally plays in a bowl on December 17th, December 18th, and people have forgotten about him. Now they're like, we might have a chance to go play against Tennessee. That's huge.
No,
That's
it'll
huge.
Be hyped for them for sure.
All right. So enough about that. Let's talk about the playoffs that actually matter to you and to me. And that is the CFB Home League, the CFB Open, and the CFB Masters. Let's go to our home league first because there's less to talk about there.
All right. It's a battle for the end there. We've got 6 teams that make the playoffs, and so you and Joe, 10-2, matching up this week.
It's gonna be a big week. I actually, for the first time this year, Joe is not in the number one spot in the league. I actually snuck ahead of him to that number one spot. If I'm able to get the W over him this week, I'm not counting anything out, because if you ever think dynasty teams, you think Uncle Joe. No, we don't. But Uncle Joe is a dangerous team, and one of us is probably going to be the number one seed. But old Rutgers is right there. He could still clinch he could still get himself a top 2 spot as well.
Yeah. Yep.
The battle down the line, though, is going to be good. It's going to be a good one to get those last few spots. The third division is completely up for grabs. Those wild card spots are up for grabs, so it's going to be interesting to see. I will say this, though, North Carolina, that's our buddy Mike Dillingham. It is rare. It is rare to see a season where you might see Mike Dillingham and BMAC both not make the playoffs in college. That is outrageous. I'm not saying they're not going to make it, but right now they both are on the outside looking in. So that could be crazy. Brian, what do you think about that? Do you think that Mike Dillingham is going to find a way to squeak it out, or do you think he's on the outside? What about yourself? What are you thinking about yourself there?
I'm starting to plan for next year. I just have too much happening wide receiver wise. Too many injuries, too many disappointments there. And then to kind of back that up in the NFL side of our league, it's Diggs, Christian Kirk, Rashee Rice, all out for the year, all on my team. So struggling there, but
brutal.
So yeah, we can go switch over to the Open League where
we'll go to the Open, and then after we're done talking about the Open and the Masters, we're going to talk about a little more in depth about the postseason. Yeah, we'll go to the standings there.
Yep. So for here, the Open League, the top 6 make the playoffs, and they get that invite into the Masters League. We'll go over that stuff in detail here in a little bit. But yeah, right now, if you take a look with 3 weeks to go, all double headers, really you've got probably these 13 people or teams in play with 7 wins plus. You've got a couple, or Steve, 77-063, 14 wins. Great job there in the Open. He's punched his ticket. He's going in. William is going in at 12-6. We've got a couple teams at 11. They're pretty safe, but not completely safe. It'd be really difficult for Not My Choice to get in there, but he's got, I think, a mathematical shot there.
If you are the Mayfield Wall, this just goes to show how much points matter. The first tiebreaker in this league is overall points. Right now, Nineveh Whalers is at 6th at 2,596 points. Mayfield Wall's at 2,589. So right now, he misses the playoffs by 7 points. That just goes to show that could be the difference of a kicker. That could be the difference of a backup tight end. Could be the difference, or making the right decision with the defense. Could be the difference between what gets him into the playoffs and what doesn't get him into the playoffs. That's that right there. Mayfield Wall could keep the same record as Nineveh Whalers and still be out just by 7 points. That's crazy.
Flip it over to the Masters. So here I am again, middle of the pack, but trending a little bit here. Loads and loads of waiver wire moves for me to get to 9-9. So I'm there tied with Dragon Masters, and I'm playing against the number 2 and 6 seed, I believe, this week. So it's a tough one, but hey, I can get up there and get into this thing. So essentially the top 6 here remain and stay in the Masters. And so, yeah, it's like me and you, Dragon Masters, all kind of battling.
If I can't,
a little bit.
Yep. If I can't be in the hunt in the final week, I don't deserve to be there, because this week I play against number 11 Maverick, number 12 Oaktown, 2 of the 4 worst scoring teams, or 2 of the 3 worst scoring teams in the league this year. If I can't get a doubleheader win this week, I deserve to be in the bottom.
Yep.
That being said, we talked about last week that we would give you more information this week. As my late brother Mark would say, More games equals more fun. So what we're going to be talking about right now is the promotion relegation update. Don't you hate it when you get to the end of the regular season and you're not in the playoffs? You don't have anything left to play for, and you're like, why am I even paying attention? Or on the converse, if you are in the top and you're like, man, it'd be nice if other people are paying attention instead of just me and the dude I'm playing in the championship game with. So the goal of the Masters League this year, the Masters League only has 12 teams. We've already told you how next year there are 12 teams that are going to be in the Masters. Next year's Masters League, we have got 16 open spots. We are going to tell you right now how those 16 open spots are going to be determined. So BMAC, go on to the next screen for me. All right. So in the CFP Masters League, the top 6 teams are going to make the playoffs, with seeds number 1 and 2 getting a first round bye, just like in most leagues. And then they're going to play 3rd and 6th. Or they're going to play the 3, 4, 5, 6 winners. So the bottom 6 are going to be an escape relegation points battle tournament. There will be no games for the teams in the bottom 6. It's going to just be points based only. You are going to be playing against everybody that is in the bottom. Your points are going to be totaled for weeks 12, 13, and 14. The top 2 teams are going to escape relegation. The bottom 4 teams are all going to drop to the Open League. Now, one thing to a note here, everybody that comes in is not going to be at equal footing. If you are the 7th best team, you're going to get a 30-point bump across all the weeks, a 30-point total. So that way you have a bonus for having a decent regular season. All the way down, graduated down to that last place team is going to have a 0-point bonus. So that way there's a small incentive for the teams at the top to still finish at the top. You can't just go and have 3 good weeks and be winless and find yourself still in the Masters League. So Masters League, top 6 in the playoffs, bottom 6 are going to have the top 2 scoring teams stay. In the Open League, the top 6 teams that are going to make the playoffs, same thing at the top. You're going to have the seeds 1 and 2 get a bye. All 6 teams are going to get promoted to the Masters League. However, move forward, all the other teams are going to have a 3-week battle for promotion. We're going to do the same thing. It's going to be graduated across all the teams. 30 points for the team that is in 7th, all the way down to 0 points for the team in last place. All those points are going to get totaled up for those 3 weeks. And the top 2 teams will also punch their ticket to the Masters League next year. Go ahead and flip the screen. End result's going to be a 16-team Masters League. Flip it one more time. You're going to have 6 Masters League playoff teams, 2 Masters League teams escaping relegation, 6 Open League playoff teams, and 2 Open League battle for promotion teams. That's going to be your 16. That is how we're going to do it this year. This is not going to be the format for next year. We want to make sure that we have those 16 spots open. We want everyone to actually earn their way in. Now, if somebody drops out or somebody says, I'm not going to be in it this year, I can't be in it this year, we'll make a determination then. But now you've got 16 teams that have all found a way to earn their way into that Masters League. BMAC, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I like totally credit you for all the creativity here. And it's definitely more fun in the playoffs when your whole league is paying attention. It's kind of fantasy football can be a little anticlimactic sometimes when you get into the playoffs, and it's like only the people that are in it are paying any sort of attention. If your league chat kind of slows down a little bit. So I love this for any league to kind of figure out a way to keep everyone involved, whether it's a playoff bracket. Honestly, I thought about this for the home league. I think maybe William brought this up in the office the other day, but it's like, why don't we do a full, like the bottom 6 are, instead of playing for, since it's a dynasty league, instead of playing just for one slot, 1 week of the playoffs, what if they played a full playoff bracket for the number 1 pick? All the way through the bottom, and then everyone's involved pretty much in the playoffs. So any way to make that happen, totally agree. I think that's great.
Yeah, I think, and what BMAC is referring to, one of the things we do that started in MVP Dynasty, and we have adopted it as well in the CFP Home League, is in the semifinal week, all 12 teams play. 12 versus 11, 9 versus 10, 7 versus 8, and then the two playoff losers from the initial week all play each other, and they get to play for draft pick purposes. That way you can't just be like, my team sucks and I'm just going to lose out and get the number one pick. You still have to win a game in that second to last week to keep that number one pick, where somebody can go in there and sneak them and steal that number one pick from you. I don't think we had anybody that actually stole a pick last year. I think that everybody that needed to win actually won. But agreed, if there's a way to continue to have fun, especially when you're in a dynasty league like we have, there's always find a way to keep everybody engaged, especially for the benefit of those at the top that, those guys deserve to have everybody taking a look. They've worked their butts off to get to that point, and people need to be paying attention.
Yeah, I would vote for that in our league for sure. That would be a fun one to try and play your way into the first pick if you're in the bottom half of the league. But anyways, yeah, man, that's all. It's just good luck to everybody out there this week. It's gonna be a big week in terms of the big games. At least the first, we've got Penn State, Ohio State at noon, Florida, Georgia at 3:30. It's gonna be a fun weekend.
Well, but there's still one thing left to go before we get off of this call, and that is for this podcast. And that is the brisket lock.
Oh man. Okay. Yeah. So give us a little bit of how we did last week, and then I will hit the drop.
All right. So last week in the brisket lock, we were horrid. Last week was so bad that we literally had to call up Smokey Drew's Barbecue and cancel the brisket. Ricky White, UNLV, 5 receptions, 57 yards, 8.2 points. Terrible. Anthony Hankerson, 16 carries, 49 yards, 3 receptions, 7.8 yards, 7.8 points. Terrible. So neither one of our brisket locks last week locked anything. They just locked themselves out of getting themselves some delicious, delectable meat.
It's time for the brisket lock.
So heading into week 10, some very interesting brisket locks. B-Mac, tell me who you got as your brisket lock this week.
All right, I've got your boy here, Kevin Concepcion. I just think he's due. He had some injuries early in the year. They are playing against Stanford, who is traveling, obviously, from the other side of the country. And it's a noon kickoff, so it's a 9 a.m. local time. There's always like a little bit of sleepiness or whatever that a team can be susceptible to there. If I didn't say this already, Stanford's 123rd against the pass so far this season. And CJ Bailey threw for 300 plus last week. So I don't think he can do that. Or I do think he'll probably have a similar type of game passing wise. And I can't see KC getting only 4 catches now, like he did last week. Now he did attempt and complete a pass. He also ran a touchdown in. So they're going to get him the ball a multitude of ways, but I think that he'll have some more catches, get some more volume, and beat out this week's projection.
So I think that the one thing that actually works well for Bailey here, or works well for Concepcion, is with the announcement last week that that Grayson McCall is retiring from football because of his injuries. Now there's no question. It's CJ Bailey's team. It's CJ Bailey's offense. There could have been a little bit of a hesitation prior to that announcement of putting too many things into the offense. And, we don't want to go and develop it completely around CJ Bailey, because what if Grayson McCall comes back? Now everything is the CJ Bailey show in that respect. So I think that it might open up the playbook a little bit, open up some ways to get people like Concepcion the ball more. So I think that that's not a bad pick. My pick is a guy that is one of those that BMAC has been talking about since before the season started. That's Savion Williams from TCU. The reason why I think Savion Williams is a must start, I feel the most confident about him as I do about any brisket lock this week, is that last week they started putting Savion Williams in a lot of wildcat direct snap formations. So not only is he getting the typical receptions, but last week he had 11 carries in that dual threat position. And it looks like his touches are only going up and up. And so I would get him in your lineup while you can, because he could get to a point where he's not playing wide receiver anymore. He's just go back there as a dual threat quarterback, and then you can't really play him at wide receiver anymore. Right now, his touches are exactly where you'd want him to be, where he's getting receptions, he's lining up at wide receiver, they're putting him in the backfield in a direct snap situation. So he's getting tons of receptions, tons of touches, 30 points last week. Savion Williams is a man to put in your lineup.
Well, this takes me back to preseason where I cut Savion Williams because I had a kind of like, I'd had him for a couple years and just hadn't done it yet. And you sent me an offer. Who was it again for Savion?
Oh, we were talking. It was like Alex Adams. We both were like, we're going to cut these guys anyway. So give me Savion. You take Alex Adams just for the fun of it. And you couldn't even bite on that one.
Yeah, because I looked into Savion and I was like, all right, I do think he's going to have a good year. We had him ranked, decently high. I can't remember where we had him preseason. Adams has done nothing, and he would fix all my receiver problems right now, I tell you what. But that's just part of it. It's part of the decision-making process with these dynasty leagues.
Savion Williams is your my version of Caleb Johnson, or a couple of years ago, my version of cutting Isaiah Pacheco. When he didn't do much in college, and then here you go with him doing what he's doing in the pros.
Brutal.
But that's the show for this week. If you are an open league participant or a Masters League participant, we'll get these slides, if we can, over onto the chat, so that way you are able to see how the postseason is going to be performing. We hope you guys like that. Definitely let us know in the chats what you think about that. Let us know what you think about Kevin Concepcion and Savion Williams as our brisket locks this week. Who do you guys like? Who do you guys not like there? And who would your brisket lock be if you got a chance to pick one? So on behalf of BMAC, my name is Matt Knowles. BMAC, have fun at the largest cocktail party.
I'm not going to that. I'll be at home having my own cocktails, but
have fun watching that game and drinking your sorrows away. And we'll go from there. On behalf of Brian McElfresh, my name is Matt Knowles. This has been the CFBDynasty.com Halloween edition of the podcast. See you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the CFB Dynasty podcast. Help us out by subscribing on YouTube and reviewing us on your podcast network.